G'day everyone, my name is Tom Craig and you're listening to my podcast, The Help Side, where we speak to some of the most recognisable names in world hockey and get an insight into who they are, what they're about and what makes them tick. Now if you like what you hear, feel free to follow our socials at The Help Side on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. We'd absolutely love that. Our guest this week is current Kookaburra Squad member Tom Wickham. I sat down with TJ at his home in Perth over an expertly made cup of coffee and we chewed the fat for an hour and a half or so about his journey from outback Australia to the bright lights of international hockey. Now, one of the best parts of doing this gig is listening to people's stories about how they got to where they are and what it took to make it there. What you're about to hear is the narrative of Tom's life and all the twists and turns which have taken him to being a regular fixture in the Kookaburras. In TJ's own words, at a dozen different stages in his life, his path could have taken him down a very, very different way. And hockey has been the constant that's kept him on the path towards achieving his dreams. Tom talks about his unfaltering dedication to his mission and the highs and lows of the journey towards sporting excellence. TJ's journey is anything but smooth, but if you're after a story of utter resilience and determination, then this is for you. Please enjoy the help side of Tom Wickham. We're off here with Tom Wickham, aka TJ, and very occasionally aka Barry. Thanks for the coffee, mate.
Pleasure.
Good to be here. We're back, help side. I don't know what episode this is, never do, but let's talk about obsessions firstly, because it's right up your alley, as you say, and we're enjoying the fruits of one of your obsessions at the moment, the coffee. Can you talk to us a little bit about that part of your personality, and more specifically, actually, tell me, I make coffees, you make coffees. For the people at home, what's the secret? Because a lot goes into it.
Well, like anything, I think you have to do a bit of homework.
It's true.
And once I started to dive into it a little bit, I actually decided to sign up for a coffee course and try and learn a little bit more about it. Had a few grand plans to deck out a caravan and make a portable coffee shop. Still hasn't eventuated. Probably part of my obsession. But I think you got to do your homework. You got to learn about it and then put it into practice.
Gotcha. And it's something you prefer making your own coffee than having a coffee in
absolutely.
It's not
just about the flavour or drinking it. It's about the process. It's about what comes from it. When you go to a cafe, you enjoy the cafe, but you also enjoy the atmosphere, sitting with your mates. If you're by yourself, reading the paper, there's something nice about just having a morning coffee, or coffee whenever really. But it's the whole process.
Very true. I find it quite soothing making coffees too.
It's good fun.
It's fun.
It's not good when you stuff it up a few times.
It's expensive.
It gets a bit expensive when you get a new bag and you have to dial it in, but it's all part of it.
Very true. Let's talk about other obsessions, because there are a few. I went on a quick tour of your house just before, so your golf clubs. There's a bike out the front. There's a few. Like, we spoke to Moose earlier in the piece about his obsessions, and I don't even think he's on your level.
Yeah, the Big Mur, he's probably a little bit like me. There's just something about when you start something, there's so much more to learn. You never know when you first start doing something. It's probably perfect. Like hockey's perfect point of view. Like, just become obsessed with it. But then other things you start to do. I mean, first time I bought a 4-wheel drive, like it was like, what?
Oh yeah.
What can I put? How can I deck it out, and how can I make it awesome? First time I picked up a bunch of golf clubs. I mean, it's no secret I'm not very good, and I probably started golf a little bit too late, and now I've had to put some serious work in over the last few years, and that quickly spirals when you want to buy a new set of clubs. It's like, well, I need to do it properly. I can't just go and buy a pair of hat clubs. And so all of a sudden you're down this vortex of trying to find out what you need. Same with bikes, same with coffee, same with running shoes. I don't know where to stop, but
you buy the best though.
You just, if you're going to do it properly. You could do what Jerry does, for instance, Jeremy Haywood, and buy the same thing 10 times that cost a year, or just get it once and be done with it. Although I have broken a few club shafts.
That's
probably from
what?
probably a combination of poor swing and swinging too hard.
But not a
snap across
not
the
over your knee.
Yeah, but have come close to that.
Yeah, I think we've all come close to that. It's a funny game, golf. Let's talk about the Super Camp. Some people may know we've had a strange year. We're in the midst of COVID-19, coming to the end of 2020. And for much of the year, we didn't have much in the way of a centralised training program over in Perth. But it culminated with a Super Camp, 2-week camp. We played 4 games. We had people coming from all over Australia, I think 40. And we're just out the back end of that. Can you give us your opinion on the Super Camp and how to go for you?
Yeah, I think it was really important. I think my first coming into it, for the guys that have been in Perth, we've been training pretty solid building for since we come back out of COVID, and we were one of the first places in the world to come out of it. So we've been going pretty solid, just training day in, day out, week in, week out, without any kind of end game or a tournament to build to. So it's been a funny year in that regard. So the camp kind of gave you something to feel like you're building towards. I reckon a few weeks before that, I wasn't really thinking about it. I wasn't really feeling it. I just felt like it was a normal, like I wasn't travelling, I was coming into it. And I think a really, really key moment for me when I was like, okay, I got to treat this like a performance or a tournament or something where I have to put something on it. Whether I created that in my own head or not, but probably the day before the camp started, Batchy presented it in a way where it's like, well, this is what's happening, and shaped it as a selection tool for them, that it could really be our highest quality games that we play up until Olympics. So once that was shaped, I kind of went, okay, I got to take that and use it as a means to become driven, and it doesn't take long to kick into that mode. I think the next day we're playing our first game. So probably up until the day before, I was just like, it's more training and playing games, and knew what it was, but probably didn't put the meaning in it, which I think in some regards is probably good for me because I like to get into it. So from that perspective, once we were into it, I think it was really good. We played 4 games, highly competitive. We got our teams created and we trained separately, and we tried to make it a little bit like a tournament. So it didn't take long for the tension to build in the group, and after game 1 there was shots fired across it, and the boys were into it, and that always happens. And I think it creates that environment that we probably haven't had all year. So I think it was a success. It allowed people that haven't been in our environment before to come in and get a taste of it, see where they're at. It allowed the coaches to see where they're at and kind of that continual progression of Kookaburras coming through. And it also allowed for the current squad to play some games of a high level, and you can train all you want, but playing games and structures and putting them into place, there's nothing quite like it. So to be able to get into that high performance mode and watch footage, debrief, you just don't get anything quite like it. So it was really good practice from that perspective. So yeah, I think all in all a success.
Yeah, it was kind of exciting actually, because obviously a lot of us were over on the East Coast, and it was quite nostalgic of a junior selection camp. Like, you're coming in, you know what people are like who you're playing against, but like we haven't seen each other for so long, so you're not really sure if you've done enough or you're up to it or something like that. Like, it was exciting. There were so many new faces, and we've had a long kind of time apart from each other, so I found it exciting in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the beautiful things that we have as our group, as the Kookaburras, is there's room for growth in other areas. New people coming in, how you treat them, how you bring them on board, how you connect with the guys that we haven't seen. Like, I hadn't seen you for months, and we played, I think game 1 we were yelling at each other. So it's how you just build those connections back, and you bring it all back together. So it's not always just about the hockey, but it's a holistic point of view, and I think that's where a lot of and when the tension rises, things quickly come to fruition. So yeah, I think it was great.
It's good stuff. And you were part of the core who were back here in Perth. You've moved here. Your life's here in Perth. It was a long time. It was a long grind. I mean, you guys went back to training quite early, as you said. Perth was one of the first places to lift the COVID restrictions. So you guys were back here on the grind for a long stretch of time with no tournaments, with nothing to break up the monotony of training, I guess. It was, how was it for you?
Yeah, I really liked it. Like, I just like doing things. So I love hockey. I love being around it. And it doesn't take me too much to have to get myself motivated. I think also when I do find myself lacking motivation, I quickly check myself and go, well, one, what else would you rather be doing? And two, like, this is what I do. There's a reason for it. You can't 1 minute love hockey then hate it. You can not always be best friends with it, but quickly got to check yourself. So I didn't have to do that too often, and it doesn't take me too much to get up and about to try and have a crack and play hockey and improve. So from that front, like, I really enjoyed it, and we're at least allowed to play hockey. We trained 3 times a week, which was less than what we normally would, and then we played club hockey, which I think was really important from a community aspect. It had a more relaxed feel, but it still allowed us to go off and play games of hockey, albeit not playing like the Kookaburras, but it still allows you to go and work on other things that you can kind of try and nut out in your own game. But yeah, it was long, like good few months there, and when you don't have like a normal training build-up is we build up and we get to tournament mode, and then that tournament mode, it takes us a few sessions to kind of start playing at our level, and we get to the back end of a tournament, we're hitting peak, playing hockey at our peak as a team. Then we go away, we have a week or two off, and then we start to build again for the next thing. And that not being there was a constant grind, and I think you can learn a lot about a lot of people in those different situations. So the consistency to work on different things in your game, get better at certain things, was definitely there. But I mean, yeah, it's a long grind when you don't have much of a break. So
for sure, and hopefully we're back into it now with some internationals next year. Let's hope.
Let's hope so.
You got a fascinating story, and I want to dive straight into it. To little Tom. Growing up, childhood, what was it like?
Fast paced, I'd say. Yeah, I was born in Mildura, so North Victoria. Never lived there. Was born there. Parents were living in Broken Hill at the time. Dad was born in Broken Hill, little mining country town. And I was born in Mildura purely for the fact that with my older sister, my mum had a few complications. So at the time, she was born in Port Augusta, so again, different. That's South Australia. Dad was working there at the time. Moved back to Broken Hill, and during Mum's pregnancy, she had a few issues. So the doctor at the time in Broken Hill, knowing there was a private hospital in Mildura, made the decision to trek down there and stayed in a caravan. Not too long after that, had me, and then I drove back to Broken Hill. Lived in Broken Hill for a few years. Little brother came along. Pretty quickly after that, we moved to Alice Springs, which is centre of Australia. Moved there when I was about 2 or 3, so it's pretty young. Yeah, Alice Springs. It's a diverse place. Got in lots of trouble and ran amok. Moved from there.
How old are we talking? What was the trouble and how old?
Yeah, so I moved from there when I was 14, 15. So
moved away from that.
Moved to South Australia, which I'm sure we'll cover later. But Alice Springs, I mean, I just wanted to be in and around everything I could be. I didn't want to sit still, couldn't sit still. I mean, the longest I'd probably sit still for was when I was allowed to play the PlayStation. And I didn't want to do that too much because Sam, my little brother, was better than me. And it's probably the one thing he was better at me then. Which is maybe why I haven't gone down the obsession of PlayStations like all you boys have. But I would always want to be in the backyard playing hockey or footy or one-on-one football with my brother. One-on-one hockey. And
were you bigger than him?
Yeah,
so I was. Just bullying him.
But I was small. I wasn't a big kid.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, I used to have to help him. We used to have this steel back fence and then a concrete garden bed at one end of the yard, and I'd always have to allow him to tackle me every now and then, maybe at 15-0.
Yeah.
Let him get a goal,
yep.
Or until he cracked it. And then Dad was a concreter, so he built us this massive sandpit, I reckon 12 metres by 3 metres wide. Like, it was
big sandpit.
Massive.
It's almost a beach.
And, free sand, just whack it in the backyard, keep the boys happy. I just remember digging like 1.5 metre big tunnel, and then grab the hose, fill it up, use it, make it clay out of it, and then build walls with it. And just obviously well and truly past sand, just digging a hole in the backyard. Yeah. Dad come home and go, "What are you doing?" Using his shovels and just always in his shed, run and mark, get on the bike, run away from home, just go bush jumping and go to a mate's house. Parents couldn't find me all day. We were just always on the go, and I'm sure that caused everyone a lot of stress, especially when little brother would start following me, and we would just start running havoc. But yeah, just always finding ways to just push the limits of what we're allowed to do. Like, I remember we had this dad's just obsessed with sheds, so we'd have this big shed full of his tools and swags and all the equipment, and then we had this little garden shed which was mum's shed, which had I don't know, secateurs in it or something. And we used to jump up on the fence, walk across the top of mum's garden shed on top of dad's shed, and on top of dad's shed he had these skylights, like the corrugated iron, but there was like a fiberglass one. Jury's still out on who cut it. I believe it was me. Sam thinks it was him, but we stole a kitchen knife out of mum's back, and then we went up, cut a big hole in this fiberglass, jumped down on the swags, and managed to get a heap of petrol and like all this stuff, and decided it'd be good to play hockey with tennis balls lit up like with petrol full of them. So Sam and I started playing like tennis ball on fire, playing hockey. Yeah, lit the backyard up, like one side of the backyard up. Right as that's happening, Dad rolls around the corner from work, and we're like, "Oh no, we're done."
What are we talking? Like how
like little like
spot fires.
Spot fires everywhere, but forget about the ball. Ball rolls off, starts another fire. So it's just like a shambles, just mission. And because it's petrol, like not putting it out. So just like things like that would just constantly happen, and then months later.
How old were you then?
10, like enough to old enough to run amok. Months later, then rains a little bit, gets mouldy, all the swags, everything's moulded out, stuffed, like rain dripping over, like all the shells that are like kind of made of timber moulded, and Dad eventually sees it, and yeah.
You never told him how you did it?
Like he knows now, he just sits there and shakes his head, but just things like that would constantly happen. Roller hockey with Sam out the backyard, but we decided to play with rocks and just smash rocks at each other. Like, it was just like always causing trouble. Like constantly just wreaking havoc, run away from home, just doing lots of stuff, which probably can't be mentioned. Yeah. And that was up until I was about 14.
Yeah. But hockey was a fixture.
Yeah, hockey was constant. Like, started playing hockey when I was about 3 or 4. Like, pretty much when we moved to Alice, Mum played hockey and decided she'd get back into it.
There's a turf there.
Was sand-based at the time.
Yeah.
And then I reckon I don't know how long after I started, it would have been a good 5 years or so, they put a water-based pitch in.
Yeah. As
juniors, you'd play between sand and the sand base and the grass, play a lot on the grass. Pretty quickly started playing like upper grades and stuff like that, and then so I transitioned from playing grass to mostly just on sand base until they got a water based pitch there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like from the day Mum said, like that was the first sport I played, but from the day she said, "Do you want to play hockey or come down?" I was just like hooked and obsessed and just could not stop playing it, to the point where I'd just go to bed at night, take my stick with me, put my uniform on. My uniform was the same colour as my school uniform. And so in the mornings I'd wake up, put my hockey uniform on and walk out like I was going to school. Like I didn't know that it was my not my hockey uniform. And Mum would always be like, "Mate, what are you doing? You can't like go back in your room, put your skills." I'm like, "Oh, sorry, mate." Just because I wanted to wear hockey uniform, hockey socks, like just obsessed. So always was a fixture. Just any chance I started playing and wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the move from Alice to Adelaide?
So in that period, Mum and Dad split by like around the end of Alice Springs. And so we moved to a country town called Freeling, which is, I don't know how far out, I forget, maybe about 80 k's out of, maybe about 80 k's from Adelaide centre. We moved there, we only lived there for a year, went to school. This is when I was I was in high school. I did a couple of years in high school in Alice, and that's a whole other story. But moved there, went to this, lived in this town in Freeling, went to a school called Kapunda, which was maybe 20 k's north east of Freeling. Did 2 years there, lived there for 2 years, and then from there we then moved again further northeast, about 160 k's from Adelaide, in a small country town called Morgan, which has a population of about 500 people. And then went to school in a town called Waikerie, which is about 60 k's further again on the Murray River. So lived in a town called Morgan, not many people, couple pubs, great place for all the Adelaide people to come. All the shackies is what we call them. All the shackies used to live in Adelaide, come up, spend their weekends there, hang out at the pub, ski all day, wakeboard, live in their shacks. And in a town that big, there's not much to do apart from just get your hands dirty, as per what we did, followed the theme from Alice Springs. Yeah, so I was about 16, 17, living in Morgan. Probably didn't get into as much trouble at school by then.
What do you mean? That was Alice...
Alice Springs, I was always in trouble.
I
was always in trouble, like fights, suspended, causing trouble with teachers, disrupting, like starting chants in the school, in the classrooms, just like always just been a menace.
Just bored.
Just couldn't sit still, mate. Like, yeah. Didn't want to sit still. If it didn't interest me, just wanted to play hockey. I want to be out playing hockey or be on my push bike. So then in Morgan, like, I probably started to be a bit more aware, like especially when I was in Alice Springs making like Northern Territory state teams and or school sports teams or teams on, like, I used to start mum and dad used to start hovering if you keep getting in trouble you won't play hockey. So that was a real driving force for me to behave.
Yeah.
But in a small town like that, when you're one of the better players, like pretty quickly they're like, oh, you better play anyway. So got away with it. So yeah, like probably stopped. I was still a class clown. Didn't really care too much for school. Not that I didn't care about certain subjects, but it just didn't interest me. Like, I'd do what I had to do to get by, and just wanted to get to hockey training. Like that's what was my means was. You know, we used to just like literally finish school. I'd get on the bus from Waikerie back to Morgan. Mum would be in the car waiting for me. I'd get in the car, we'd drive to Adelaide, go to hockey training. So I was already like thinking about when school was finishing, just so I could get to hockey training. So, and then on weekends I'd be just, if I wasn't at hockey or as soon as I got back from hockey, I'd be just go run amok around the streets, go hang out with my mates, and get up to mischief. So between a little bit of school, a lot of mischief, and a lot of hockey, that's pretty much what my teenage years entail.
In episode 19 of The Help Side, we spoke to former Kookaburras enforcer Tristan White. Here's a peek.
On to that final game. That is the best game of hockey I've ever been involved in. And when I say involved in, I was a rookie. We did play rotations in those days, but I think Rick might have shaved my rotations off, so I wasn't on the field a whole lot. But I just remember the atmosphere, you know, that you had Jamie Dwyer, Mark Knowles, just leading the team around, Eddie Ockenden, and just going up against this Dutch team who probably thought it was their year to win it. You know, we've had such success with the Champions Trophy as Australia, and I think they thought that was their time. They were looking really good and had probably their best squad that they could, and they really gave it to us. And it took, like you said, the wonder strike from Kieran at the end there, and
Good
the
pass,
rest
though.
is kind of history. Yeah, good pass, good pass. Well, before that, I remember it was extra time, and I came off the field, and the coaches said, "Oh, you're next to go on for the rotations," and I said, "No, I'm not going. I can't. I'm not going on. Like, put someone else out there. I'm not doing it at this time of the game." And they just said, "Well, tough, mate. You're out there. This is part of the rotations. This is how it works. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie." And yeah, got out there. Eddie Ocken razzle dazzled. I think he chopped up about 6 of their players on the sideline, and they left me alone in the middle of the field, which is probably tactical because they weren't worried about me. And yeah, I don't remember it happening. I just remember Kieran scoring, and yeah, we carried on a bit. And lucky I had about 20 mates that were down there for a Bucks party. That just made the atmosphere a whole lot better as well, and got showered in beers, and yeah, had a pretty good time.
So sick. I can't like that. That really surprises me. Knowing you now and having started playing with you when you're a little bit older and more experienced, it does surprise me that you didn't want to go on in that extra time.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am a different player now. And I kind of sometimes I wonder, imagine if I knew the things I know now when I was that young. But it's not possible to do that. I think you've got to learn in your own way. And I definitely wasn't kind of measured or calm or super confident. I was a bit of a hothead at times, and yeah, it's just one of those things that I've developed over a period. And it's funny when people kind of say they call me the old dog now, or say that I'm the daddy, as you guys like to say, because it definitely wasn't something that was natural at the start, but something I kind of learned out of necessity, I think.
That's Tristan White in episode 19 of The Help Side. Now let's get back to a young Tom Wickham, who's just about to move to Adelaide in the next step of his journey towards playing for Australia. You moved to Adelaide eventually?
Yeah, so I moved to Adelaide when I think I was 17, like early 17. Moved, it was like I finished year 11, got through year 11, I'll say, and then was offered a scholarship, like a SASI scholarship, so South Australian Sports Institute. And at the time, I was like, I had a girlfriend, I was like, I don't really want to move, like, I'll just do it from here, drive. But it was kind of like, well, the commitments are going to be too big for you to be able to keep doing what you're doing, so you got to make a shift to Adelaide. So I moved to Adelaide, was lucky enough to get an apprenticeship as a carpenter, and moved out of home, drove up to Adelaide, and lived in Adelaide for, I think, till I was 20, which is when I moved to Perth. But in those years, was very much just stumbling through life, like did not know much about anything. I was getting paid pretty good money. I was like pretty happy with what I was getting paid. It was only apprenticeship wages, but from not having any money to having money, I just spent it on board shorts, I think. Like I did, what else could I spend it on? No real understanding of money then. I was just like, let's just spend it and have a good time, and continue to run amok when I wasn't at hockey. Weekends I'd drive back to Adelaide. I remember just like Friday nights, finish hockey training at like 8:30, and just like literally get in the car and just like VT Commodore, speed home as fast as I could, like just ridiculous, through the roofs, just to get home, just so I could be with my mates and run amok and do what you do when you're that age. What some people do. So yeah, like Adelaide was interesting because I was probably, like, I think I look back now and there's so many things that I forget unless you get me talking about it, because I was just moving so fast paced for myself that I was just blinkers on, and it was like hockey, 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 and if it's not hockey, it's mates. And I just was just on a mission, and that was the mission I was on, and everything else around me was just kind of like not keeping up. lots of different friend groups, lots of different mates. Like, everyone was on my mission, or it was just like, I'll speak to you later type thing. And like I really really drove a lot of that into like my parents was just like, get on board. Like when I was still living in Morgan before moving up to Adelaide, like my mum was 9 months pregnant with my half sister, and I was like, let's get in the car, gotta go to hockey, without any recollection of like how she's feeling that day. I was just like, Mum, let's go. So in the car we'd get, and we'd drive to Adelaide, drive back, do that 3 times a week. Weekends I'd go and play like in the country competition, and I was just running everyone ragged just to get on my board. And it was just like, the mission was, I'm playing hockey for Australia, let's do it. So like I look back on it now, and I think like I have a real big appreciation for those people. And then even when I got to Adelaide, like it was because I just spending my money on board shorts. I'd be like, Mum, Dad, like, got no money, help me, car's broken down, what are you doing with my money? Spending it. So yeah, I lived in a few different people's like spare rooms for a little while. Moved in with my auntie and uncle, who at the time also cared for my grandmother, and lived in the spare room, and like I just look back to those situations now, like I was just a nightmare. Like I was just like, come home, eat, leave a mess, go to hockey. And I remember when I told my auntie and uncle I was moving out, and they were just a bit like, why are you moving out? Like, you got it pretty easy here. And I was like, no, I don't. Like, I have to do stuff. Like, you want me to clean? Like, you want me to... But all I was thinking was like, no, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to move out and live with my mate. And then by the time I moved out with my mate, I was like, I should have stayed at my auntie's. So I was just like, yeah, on a mission, and there's a lot of people that helped me, and I probably didn't stop to look back at it until probably the last few years and start to go, oh, there's a lot of support I had around me that I didn't really look at. So yeah.
What was behind the mission? Just wanted to play for Australia real bad.
I just remember starting, like, one Christmas I got like this big foam glove that had like Kookaburras written across it, and this bucket hat that had Kookaburras, and I would have been like, I don't know, 5, 6, and I just vividly remember this. Like, I thought I was this cool kid with this bucket hat and this foam thing. I'd run around and like hit people with it, and I was like, that's like the Kookaburras. That's Australia. That's the best you can be. That's like the pinnacle. And so once I was like, that's, you know, you say it as a kid. I was like, Mum, I'm gonna play for Australia. Yeah, mate, no worries, good on you. You know, and I think back to moments at school, like everyone knew that I was a hockey player, but a little shit at the same time. Don't know if I can say that. I was a little shit, and it kind of grew more when like as you get older, like you sit down, you talk to your parents, and they would say like, oh, your teachers just thought you were going to be in jail or in trouble or not go anywhere because you were just such a little menace. Couldn't get you to sit still, couldn't get you to concentrate. And so that started to grow more, and me. It was like, I'm on a mission. Like, I'm going to show you that I will play for Australia. Like, I'm going to make it happen. And I think that's where that real burning desire for me to just prove people wrong or fight to get this mission done. And as it grows, it develops, and you get more understanding of it, and you give it. From an early age, I was just like, foam glove, bucket hat. That's what I want to be. I want to play for Australia. And like, you don't comprehend how little money we make back then. But I was like, if I play for Australia, that's it. Like, I've made it. Little do you know it then. But that was the mission, and that was what I was after. And man, like, just whenever there was hockey on the table, it was like, let's do it. So yeah.
I'm going to get to your debut in 2013 in a little bit, but you said before that your life could have gone 1,000 different ways. Is there any time in particular before your eventual call up to the Kookaburras in 2013 that was a do or die moment or a breaking point moment?
Yeah, there's so many twists and turns, and like I've said, like I've kind of danced around it and just kind of said, you know, like, yeah, I was a little shit or whatever, but like to the point where like breaking the law was things that myself, my little brother would get up to, and we were really pushing the boundaries of what we should and shouldn't be doing. When my parents split, this was just before we moved to Alice Springs. My old man moved to a south of country town or coastal town on the peninsula of South Australia called Galway, and there's just a peninsula town. He moved there and started up his own concrete plant business, and then we moved as a family. My sister stayed in Alice Springs to finish year 12, and my little brother and I, probably as we started to get older, we started to fight more and more. And I just remember Sam and I having this massive Barney. This is when we were living in Freeling. This massive fight over a PlayStation, I think it was. We just had this big fight, and at the time, like, my mum was going through like really severe depression. 2 little kids, like, just causing havoc. Like, my older sister stayed in Alice Springs, so our home became a little, like, quite separated. And so my mum and her partner, we lived in their house in Freeling for a little while, and one night we just got in this massive fight. Sam's like, I'm running away. I'm going to Dad's, which is about 500 k's away. So
How old is he?
a couple of years younger than me, so I reckon he would have been about 12 and I would have been about 14. Had it on, and then he's like, I'm running away. He's leaving. So Sam's on this mission, which was walk to Galway. Anyway, so that didn't happen, and then because of the circumstances and at the time, the best decision is, especially in Mum's eyes, was I got to breathe. Like, I got to get away from this for a bit. So we moved to Dad's for a little while, for a couple of weeks, and after that, which at that time, with my old man starting his concrete business, he put everything on the line. Like, he had nothing. He literally just put himself forward and said, I'm going to dive into this. I can work, I can build a life for myself, I can build something to give my kids or leave my kids or look after us. And I admire that so much. And at the time, you don't know what's going to happen until it happens. But we moved in, and then a few weeks later, we all kind of sat around the table and discussed what we were going to do. And the decision at the time was Sam was going to stay with Dad, and I was going to go home and live with my mum. And that was essentially like your best mate just being taken away from you, and you don't really understand it. And at the time, again, the decisions were made, and that's what happened. So you got to live on and push through it. And my little brother, Dad was never home, and Dad was always at work, and he was working from 3 till evening every day just to keep this thing afloat. And he was like, I'm not sure how I'm meant to parent at my best. So my little brother went through this phase of starting to hang out with older blokes, stopped going to school, just started running muck, and went down a path of drugs and getting in trouble. And then I'm sitting up the other opposite side of South Australia, doing similar things, running amok, getting into trouble, pushing the boundaries of what I should or shouldn't be doing. But I always had something, which was hockey. And that was a really interesting period in our life, because at the time you're not processing it, you're just going with it. Sam's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing. My sister's in Alice Springs. My mum is severely depressed and trying to come through it and trying to come to that. My old man's trying to bring up one of his kids when he's got this business, when he's in massive amount of debt, just to get it to the point. And just so much stuff going on, and that was a real point in my life where hockey became probably the thing that just kept me going. I'd still run amok, I'd still be no good and still be doing things, but it always brought me back, probably to the point where I didn't go as far down the path as what my little brother did. And coming out of that, like, when more opportunities started to come my way, hockey-wise, I started to have to clean it up, but I'd also really fight with all the other things that was going on. And that was a real moment where things could have been totally different. But it was just like I was on this mission, and that mission kept me straight and narrow. Or narrow. But you know, that goes on, and then there's moments in my career in Alice Spring, that too, but I mean in Adelaide where I was so, even when it come to people that I played with, like it was like you're on my mission, and the mission was to play for Australia, and I'm playing club hockey, but I'd get so frustrated at people if they wouldn't get on board with what I needed, when I needed it, and it became this. It became an obsession where I was just like, get on board or you're going to get left behind. And as you get older, you start to realise that that's not the way. But I remember never not made something. And I was always one of the best, and I was always pushing everyone, and I was always just like having a crack, and I was like, let's get better. And I remember like I was, God knows what reason, but I was selected for like the Youth Olympics, and that was a Junior World Cup team with, you know, some of our greats currently still around, but like you got Swanee and Weddy and the Bates brothers, Gov, Leon Haywood. So that was like all those guys, Chris Borza, and I didn't get selected, and I had no right to be selected, and I went to this Youth Olympics and played and just battled through it, and I was nowhere near it. Like, I look back now, at the time I was like, yeah, I'm playing for Australia. I thought it was awesome, but it wasn't the Kookaburras. And I remember, and I remember coming back from that, and I was just like, I got work to do. Like I've just run around the pitch and not made an impact, done nothing. And I come back from that.
18, 19?
That was 2009.
Yep.
Oh, so it would have been 19.
Yep.
And at the time, Craig Victory was our sassy coach, and I just remember like kind of going like, what's next? Like, how am I going to get back from this? Because that was it was kind of a good pathway or a segue into being noticed, identified, etc. 2010 came around, and that was under 21s in Melbourne, and I'll never forget this tournament because it was kind of like the tournament I'd like from playing that Youth Olympics and just being nowhere to that 2010 under 21s. Like, I'd done so much work with Jig, and now Jig was on my mission too, and I would just be like, when are we training? Individual sessions, let's play hockey, and like just be constantly on the text team. Like
Jig's Craig Victory.
Yeah. And we got to that tournament, and like I just smashed it. Like I played out of my skin, scored a heap of goals, player of the tournament, and at that time, Gooders was the junior coach, and this is only my recollection of it happening, but like he was the one that kind of went, oh, this kid's got something, let's give him a go. Anyway, I went like end of 2010, I came to Perth, did a couple of training sessions, then was offered an AO scholarship in start of 2011, which is when I made that transition. So all through that, like, start with when my parents split up to like the moment of getting an AO scholarship was just so many moments where I could have been in trouble and it all ended, or made something, not made something, wanted to quit, like just heaps of stuff, but hockey just kept bringing me back and keeping me on this clean path with whatever else was going on in there in my life.
Did the mission ever falter? Were there any times where you thought, this is too hard?
Well, I mean, it kind of, the crazy thing is from 2011 to now, like it just starts, it continues on that path. And I think only once in that period, and this is like, I don't know how old I was, maybe it was after that Youth Olympics, I remember sitting with Sam, just talking to Sam. I was probably drinking a beer or something, to be honest, I don't know. And I remember saying to him, like, oh, I don't know, like, there's more, like, I could do more. There's other things I could do in my life. And I remember Sam just explicitly swearing at me, and he was like, nah, like, F that. He's like, you said you're playing for Australia, not like, what are you doing? And I just remember going, like, checking myself, especially all the things that Sam was going through in his whole life, and I'll never forget that moment, because, like, what if he had said, like, yeah, like let's go run amok. Like, it could have been different. But he got me at a moment of weakness and was like, mate, what are you talking about? Like, you said you're playing for Australia. And I reckon that was the only time that I truly went, like, maybe I can't do it. there's been heaps of moments where the door has nearly been closed but not locked, and I've gone nuts, scupper, I'll keep the door open again. And that's happened so many times, probably more. As a young kid stumbling through it versus from living in Perth, there's been a lot of other like moments of the door being closed but opening it back up. And yeah, when I moved to Perth, like I remember getting a phone call. I think it was Rick. Said it was either Rick or at the time Andrew Smith, the HP manager. I can't remember. You're getting a scholarship, like you an AA scholarship. You get to move to Perth.
When was that?
That was end of 2010. I remember moving into this weatherboard house, a couple of k's away from the hockey stadium. Like house on stilts, like thing was falling apart. In summer, like the aircon, there's no aircon, and it was just like in summer the house was so hot, like you may as well just sit outside in the sun. And then in the winter it was that cold because the walls were that thin. And I just living there for 2 years, and like the shower didn't actually have a sprinkler head. It was just literally like a hose, and like just a straight stream of water would run out of it. And as it hit your back, it'd go everywhere, and every day you'd just be mopping up the floor, like doing that for 2 years just to chase this mission.
Why did you have to live like that though?
Well, when I moved, because I couldn't see where I was going to move, at the time, the AAS helped me, and I don't think they and me being me, I was like, yeah, just get me there. So this was the house. I was like, well, I don't want to pay too much. I think I paid like $320 at the time. I was living with my girlfriend, and we would split the rent, and like that was where we lived. Just this massive block of sand with a house on stilts. The ovens didn't barely work. The toilets always had to get fixed. Like it was just a crappy house. Remember my car getting smashed windows, like just living in this thing, but I was on this mission. And when that year of 2011, like I think back to that now, and from 2011, I just remember the blue, white, red singlets running around a hockey pitch like madmen with like 40 blokes just stumbling through, because I'd never been in an environment where like I wasn't really the best, or I wasn't like the one challenging, and in my head I was just like, I'm just going to compete because I can play. I don't remember making friends with anyone. I don't remember. Well, I made friends with one bloke, or a few people, but not connecting with them as like teammates, or not diving into this environment of high performance. I would just go to training, leave training, and didn't really understand how to live in that environment. And it was such a blur that year of my first year in the program, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to survive. When I moved, at that time I was getting paid like a small amount of money from AS. Started doing some labouring work for a guy, Scott Martin, great guy, love him to death. And he taught me how to landscape and pave. And I worked with him for like 3 years after that. And so through 2011, I would go to work, go pave, and go to bed. And that was like my life. But I don't remember diving into an environment where I was a part of it. I was just being there. So it was quite interesting from the back of 2010, like really having a vision and going like, I'm playing really good hockey, to going to Perth as this angry kid that was just on this mission but had no idea how to do it, or didn't have the tools to do it. So that was quite an interesting year, 2011.
That's it for part A. See you soon for part B of the help side with Tom Wickham.